Stop being obsolete, Kim. Run the batch or get off my floor. Operations Manager Darren Pike barked across Reactor Bay 3, and 11 hours later, the decision inside that sentence would burn through a stainless reactor wall, idle a $94 million specialty resins unit for 47 days, and send 2 operators to a burn ward. The words hit Kim Chambers harder than the alarm horn that had been chirping every 30 seconds all morning, because the insult was public, deliberate, and timed for maximum pressure. Panel operators on headset, 2 new hires pretending not to stare, and a maintenance planner standing with a tablet near the solvent manifold as if this were just another production push. Kim had spent 12 years in exothermic systems, long enough to know that most disasters began with the same pattern: a manager treating physics like an opinion, and long enough to recognize that this moment was not about process control anymore. It was about hierarchy, it was about humiliation as a management tool. It was about forcing one person with technical authority to act against her own training, so the blame could be redistributed later. She kept her gloves on the stainless rail beside the DCS console, felt the faint vibration from recirculation pumps through the metal, and answered in a voice steady enough that Eli and Marta could hear every word without a headset. My name is Kim Chambers. I'm a senior process technician, 12 years on exothermic systems. I make $128,000 a year because I know exactly when heat balance goes non-linear and people die. Darren gave a short laugh that did not reach his eyes. He wore a clean, hard hat and a white shirt without a single chemical mark on the cuff, the uniform of someone who visited the bay for pressure but never for cleanup. You make 128 because this place was soft on old operators, he said. Today you either run the batch or you're done. Kim turned back to the panel. HX204 differential pressure was a solid red tile on the top left trend page, not flickering, not intermittent, fully latched at alarm condition. Outlet temperature from the exchanger had drifted high over the last 40 minutes, and the recirc audio coming through the wall-mounted vibration monitor had changed from a smooth hiss to a gravelly, uneven grind that signaled cavitation at the pump suction. Those 3 indicators together meant a single thing in plain language. The reactor's cooling side was losing capacity, while reaction side heat generation remained on schedule. In a normal startup, that imbalance could still be corrected by rate control. In forced production mode with a fouled exchanger, it became thermal debt. Every minute you pretended it was fine, you borrowed instability at compound interest. Kim tapped the trend screen and brought up a 6-hour view, so the whole crew could see the curve. Heat removal is down, she said, not raising her volume. When cooling capacity drops below heat generation, temperature climbs, reaction rate accelerates, and the loop feeds itself. That is Runaway. Darren stepped in close enough that she could smell mint gum over hot oil and glycol. It's a dirty coil, not a bomb, he said. You people love drama. The insult was strategic, and Kim recognized each layer. First came obsolete, a label designed to make experience sound like a defect. Next would come coward, because fear in a hazardous operation could be reframed as weakness instead of risk literacy. Then lazy, because refusing an unsafe startup could be repackaged as resistance to work. The script was old. The consequences were always new. She did not argue with his tone. She pointed with 2 fingers at the instrument cluster above the panel where the local indicator echoed the DCS values in hard red numerics. "You can call me what you want," she said. "The exchanger does not care." Around them, Reactor Bay 3 kept moving with that layered industrial soundtrack that made outsiders think the plant was stable. Agitator hum from Bay 2 through a concrete wall. Periodic clack of pneumatic valves seating. Compressor pulse in the overhead pipe rack. Distant forklift reverse alarm from shipping. Stability in a chemical unit was never the absence of noise. It was predictable noise. What made Kim's shoulders tighten was unpredictability, and today it sat in the room in 3 visible forms: red alarm persistence, management override posture, and new operators waiting to see which authority counted. Eli stood near the transfer skid with his face shield pushed up, one hand resting on the manual feed lever he had not yet touched. He was 6 weeks out of onboarding, precise with paperwork, quick with valve lineups, and still vulnerable to tidal-based pressure. Marta, even newer, kept glancing between Kim and Darren like she was tracking a tennis match where the ball was her future. Kim remembered her own first year, when every manager sounded certain and every certainty sounded like competence. The hardest lesson had been learning that confidence and correctness were separate systems. Darren clapped once, sharp and theatrical, and addressed the room, not the panel. "Listen up. We are behind quota. We lost 4 hours on night shift. Corporate is already on me about quarter-end output. We run this batch now." He pointed at Kim without looking at the trend screen. "If she won't do it, someone else will." There was no profanity in his voice, only administrative force, which made it more dangerous. Rage could be reported as misconduct. Calm coercion often got filed as operational alignment. Kim rotated the monitor toward the junior crew and zoomed into the exchanger trend again. "Read this line," she said to Eli. "Not his board, this line." Eli leaned in. "DP is 2.38 bar, he said quietly. "Climbing." "Limit?" Kim asked. 1.8 for transfer permissive." Darren cut in. "Limit is a suggestion when maintenance is delayed." Kim looked at the red alarm tile. Then she looked at Darren. She looked at the historical fouling curve. Then she looked at his production board with green magnets lined up like promises that did not have to survive contact with metal temperature. She looked at the lockout key in his hand. Then she looked at Eli and Marta and saw the exact second they understood this was not a technical disagreement. This was a command performance about obedience. The insult shock did what it was designed to do: isolate the expert, make caution seem personal, and force the room to choose between the person with authority on paper and the person with authority in reality. Kim felt the familiar surge of anger rise and flatten into procedure. Anger could not operate a plant. Procedure could. "I'm documenting this conversation," she said. 6:47, operations manager directing startup with HX204 high differential pressure active. Darren tilted his head. "Go ahead and write your diary entry." "You are still going to run it." She opened the electronic logbook and typed exactly what she had said, each word stripped of emotion, because emotion got challenged in hearings, and timestamps did not. Then she keyed the bay radio so dispatch recording would capture her voice and the ambient alarms under it. "Control to all Bay 3 personnel," she said. "Unsafe startup condition identified at HX204, high DP active, authorization withheld by senior process technician pending restoration of cooling margin." She released the button. The channel stayed silent for 2 beats. Then a crackle from utilities came through. "Copy Bay 3 note. That acknowledgement mattered. It established external contact. It created a second record beyond her terminal login. Darren heard it and his jaw flexed. "You're not the sheriff," he said. "You are an operator. Operate." Kim kept her eyes on the panel because looking at him now would make this personal, and she needed it procedural. The reactor level sat ready for feed. Jacket inlet flow oscillated at the edge of acceptable variance. Vent header pressure was stable, but narrower than she liked. None of those values alone triggered shutdown. Together with fouled heat exchange, they described a process with no cushion. She spoke to the room, still calm. Process safety is not voting. It is threshold. Darren took one step closer and lowered his voice into that intimate threat range managers used when they wanted compliance without witnesses hearing the exact phrasing. "Coward," he said. "Lazy, obsolete. Pick one. If you won't do your job, get off my floor and let someone hungry do it." Kim turned then, finally, and held his gaze. The sting of the words was real, and she let herself feel it for one breath because denial made bad decisions. Then she parked the feeling where she parked all noise that did not move molecules. "My job," she said, "is to keep this bay from becoming an incident report." The horn chirped again. Red tile, steady. Pump note, rough. Darren raised the lockout key between two fingers like a judge, displaying evidence, and called over Kim's shoulder. "Eli, on my command." Eli did not move. Not yet. The whole bay seemed to contract around that pause. Not into silence, but into focus. Every mechanical sound suddenly sorted by consequence instead of habit. At 6:49, with the alarm still latched and the exchanger still fouled, Kim understood that the first line Darren had thrown at her was never just an insult. It was the opening move in a chain that would test whether this plant answered to procedure or to ego. At 6:49, with Darren still holding the lockout key like a threat made of brass, Kim shifted one step left and pressed the hardwired acknowledge at the local alarm station. The horn dropped from a repeating stab to a steady light pattern, but the red tile on the DCS did not clear. That distinction mattered. Acknowledge only silenced human irritation. It never removed process danger. She knew Darren counted on that confusion, on the way a quieter bay could make bad conditions feel tolerable. She refused to give him that advantage. "Eli," she said, voice level, "come to the panel. Marta, grab the field tablet and your IR gun. We verify every cooling side signal in person." Darren gave a short snort. "You're staging theater." Kim did not look at him. "No, I'm staging evidence." She pulled up the HX204 diagnostic page and angled the monitor so the juniors could see the whole loop. Differential pressure sat at 2.41 bar and climbed by hundredths. Jacket inlet temperature was 29.8 degrees Celsius, normal for that utility train. Jacket outlet was 47.3 degrees Celsius and drifting upward, not because the exchanger was removing more heat, but because it was failing to remove enough before recirculation. Reactor bulk temperature held at 86.9 degrees Celsius, still below the high trip, yet trending wrong for pre-feed hold. In healthy conditions, pre-feed hold flattened or cooled by a fraction per minute while agitation equalized. This one crept in the other direction. Kim tapped each tag with a gloved finger as she spoke, forcing the sequence into the room like a checklist. Signal 1, high DP across HX204. Signal 2, rising jacket return. Signal 3, rising bulk temp at constant duty. That is not noise. That is lost heat transfer area from fouling. Marta hurried back from the instrument cabinet with the tablet and handheld infrared thermometer, hard hat slightly crooked from moving too fast. She looked at Kim first, then at Darren, then back to Kim. Which points? Kim keyed the radio to maintenance channel and spoke without haste. Maintenance Bay 3 need witness for exchanger verification now. Differential pressure transmitter versus local gauge, plus suction vibration check. A crackled reply came from Lou Denning, day shift mechanical lead. Copy, Bay 3, 2 minutes out. External witness secured. Kim logged the call with timestamp, then handed Marta the IR gun. Scan jacket inlet line at the exchanger nozzle, then outlet nozzle. 3 readings each, center line, and 2 o'clock positions. Read them out loud. Darren folded his arms. You already have digital temperatures? Kim answered him while watching Marta work. Digital can drift. Steel does not. The bay smelled of warm solvent, glycol, and the faint metallic tang that came when pumps ran near vapor pressure margins. Kim heard the recirculation pump through both wall and floor now, a chopped, gravelly undertone riding beneath the motor's bass hum. Cavitation did not announce itself with one dramatic bang. It announced itself with texture, a sound like stones, tumbling in a pipe that should have sounded like smooth water. Eli flinched slightly when the tone surged for half a second and fell back. Kim noticed and used it. That noise is vapor pockets collapsing at the impeller eye, she said. Tiny local shock events over and over. It means suction conditions are degrading. When that happens, flow becomes unstable, and unstable flow means unstable heat removal. Marta read from the tablet and IR display, careful now. Inlet nozzle, 29.6, 29.7, 29.5. Outlet nozzle, 47.2, 47.5, 47.3. Kim nodded once. Matches the transmitters within tolerance. Sensors are not lying. She pulled up the last clean run profile from 2 weeks earlier and overlaid it on the current trend. The contrast was brutal even to untrained eyes. Under normal fouling factors, a 17.5 degrees Celsius delta across that loop at this hold condition would indicate robust heat pickup and transfer. Today the delta looked large on paper, but carried the wrong shape. Rising outlet without proportional bulk stabilization, plus climbing DP, which pointed to restricted passage and poor effective area. Heat was entering coolant, yes, but not exiting the reactor fast enough to maintain controllability once feed started. She looked at Eli. You see this bend right here? She traced the live curve with a cursor. That bend should flatten before transfer. It is steepening. That is thermal debt accumulating. Lou arrived with a vibration pen and grease-stained coveralls, breathing hard from the run across units. He took one glance at Darren's posture, one glance at Kim's screen, and understood the politics in under a second. What do you need witnessed? He asked. Kim handed him the tablet stylus. Confirm transmitter against local DP gauge and capture pump bearing vibration and suction pressure. They moved together down the graded deck toward HX204, passing under steam tracing and cable trays. The exchanger shell vibrated at a low amplitude that felt wrong through glove and palm. Not loose, but strained, like a machine working uphill. Lou crouched by the gauge manifold, wiped the faceplate with his sleeve, and read aloud. Local DP 2.42 bar, within 1 click of DCS. He tapped the vibration pen to the pump housing and watched the LEDs climb. Axials elevated, cavitation signature present. He looked at Kim, then at Darren, who had followed at a distance. This is not instrumentation error. Kim did not need Lou to tell her what came next, but she needed it on record. She opened the electronic log template for abnormal condition verification and dictated while Marta typed. 652, maintenance witness confirms HX 204 differential pressure by local gauge at 2.42 bars. 653, vibration measurement indicates cavitation at recirculation pump suction. IR spot check confirms transmitter accuracy at exchanger nozzles. She paused long enough for each line to save. Recommendation: hold feed, initiate controlled cool down, isolate exchanger for cleaning and inspection. Darren stepped closer, voice flattened into managerial contempt. Recommendation denied. We are not losing another shift to a dirty exchanger. Lou straightened slowly and did not move out of Kim's line of sight. Darren, this is outside normal envelope. Darren answered without taking his eyes off Kim. Noted. Kim walked back to the panel with the others at her shoulder. She opened the process hazard matrix that lived in the DCS sidebar. A tool most managers ignored because it converted opinions into thresholds. She spoke to Eli and Marta as if she were teaching a qualification module, because that framing protected them from panic and anchored them to mechanism. Exothermic reaction control has 3 legs, she said: heat generation rate, heat removal rate, and response time. If one leg shortens, you compensate with another. Today, heat removal is shortened by fouling. Response time is already stretched by cavitating flow. That leaves only generation rate. If you open feed at normal set point, generation outruns removal before control valves can catch up. Eli swallowed and asked the right question. What if we feed slower? Kim appreciated that he asked mechanism, not permission. Slower feed buys time, but only if cooling margin is stable. Our margin is eroding while we stand here. Slower under degrading removal is still a race you eventually lose. She pulled a laminated card from the side pocket of the console, edges soft from years of use. Startup permissives, plain language. Item 12 read, do not initiate batch transfer with HX204DP above 1.8 bar unless written engineering deviation approved and temporary controls active. There was no approved deviation. There were no temporary controls beyond Darren's confidence. Kim held the card so both juniors could read it. This is why the rule exists. It was written after a near miss in another unit. Different chemistry, same math. Darren laughed once, sharp and dismissive. You're quoting cards while orders are being given. Kim set the card down carefully. I'm quoting incident memory. By 6:56, the trend line had inched again, 2.45 bar. Reactor bulk 87.4 degrees Celsius. Jacket outlet 47.9 degrees Celsius. No feed yet, and still the system drifted toward the edge. That was the detail that sealed the hazard beyond argument. When a loop worsened in static hold, it would worsen faster under dynamic load. Kim keyed the bay radio again and made her words formal, stripped of emotion and accusation. Control to dispatch and utilities. Bay 3 status update. HX204. Verification complete. High differential pressure confirmed by field gauge. Cooling side instability confirmed by vibration. Senior technician maintains no transfer authorization pending exchanger service. Utilities answered first. Copy Bay 3. Dispatch came a second later. Copy logged. 2 channels, 2 records, 2 witnesses outside Darren's reporting chain. Darren moved to the supervisor station and entered his credentials on the override page with deliberate keystrokes, each one loud in the short silence after the radio call. Kim watched his hands, then the screen, then the juniors. The override request window flashed amber. High DP permissive active. Manual supervisor acknowledgement required. He clicked through the warning text without reading it aloud. She could feel Eli's attention split between panel data and hierarchy pressure, the exact fracture line where industrial accidents formed. Kim kept talking, not to win Darren, but to keep the younger operators inside reality. Look at trend slope, not color, she said. Color tells you alarm state. Slope tells you where the process will be in 30 seconds. Marta nodded, eyes fixed on the graph. Eli whispered, almost to himself, "It's deepening." Kim opened the relief system capacity sheet and pointed to one row. At this viscosity and solvent fraction, relief valve RV3 can handle upset vapor if feed is cut promptly and condenser duty is available. With fouled exchange and delayed cut, you hit relief earlier and harder. Relief is not a control strategy. Relief is damage limitation. She turned to Eli directly. You are not being asked to run a normal batch. You are being asked to start in a degraded state with known cooling deficit. That distinction can keep you alive. Darren snapped the lockout key onto a retractable lanyard and said, "What keeps people employed is output." Kim answered with the same calm she had used since the first insult. Output without control is scrap at best and casualties at worst. At 6:58, Lou's phone buzzed with a maintenance work order update, and he glanced down, jaw tightening. Night shift deferred HX204 clean to next window, he said quietly. Note says throughput priority. Kim took the phone, read the note, and handed it back. She logged that line too, not because she needed to prove herself right, but because deferred maintenance plus forced override was a known causal pair in every process. Safety investigation she had ever read. Small deferrals did not stay small when layered on exothermic duty. They stacked. They coupled. They crossed thresholds. She stepped to the side cabinet, pulled the portable ultrasonic flow meter from its charging cradle, and clipped it to the recirc line with practiced speed. If the signal came back noisy, that itself would confirm flow instability. If it came back low, it would confirm reduced cooling circulation beyond what the control valve position suggested. The meter took 12 long seconds to lock. Then numbers appeared. Flow oscillating between 71 and 84 cubic meters per hour around a target of 96. She rotated the screen toward Marta and Eli. There. Valve says open. Actual flow says starved. Another leg gone. Eli exhaled through his teeth, a sound half disbelief, half fear. Darren looked at the meter and then away, as if refusing eye contact with data could lower it. Kim returned the meter to the console and wrote one final line in the live log. 0659. Multi-source verification confirms fouled HX204, unstable recirculation, reduced cooling capacity. Startup remains non-compliant with procedure and outside controllable heat balance envelope. She read it aloud before hitting save. The words landed in the bay with the weight of a legal affidavit and a warning bell at the same time. The red alarm tile stayed lit. The pump kept grinding. The exchanger kept resisting flow. Every indicator in the system pointed one direction, and Kim held that direction in the open where no one could later claim uncertainty. Physics had already published its verdict. Management had simply not accepted service of it yet. Physics had already published its verdict. Management had simply not accepted service of it yet. And Kim knew the next move would decide whether the bay still belonged to procedure or to ego. Darren's hand stayed on the supervisor console, thumb hovering over the final acknowledgement key that would clear the permissive block in software while leaving the mechanical problem untouched in steel. Kim stepped in close enough to read the override text reflected in his safety glasses and spoke to him in the same measured cadence she used during emergency drills. If you force manual with HX204 at 2.45, you remove the only automatic pause that keeps feed from outrunning cooling. That is not production leadership. That is pre-incident behavior. Darren did not look at her. "You've made your note," he said. "Now step aside." Kim did not move. "No, I'm refusing authorization under Procedure 7.3.4, Exothermic Startup Safeguards. I am stating clearly on witness that feed initiation under current exchanger condition can produce accelerating temperature rise beyond controllable loop response." Eli shifted his weight near the skid, eyes fixed on the feed lever, as if distance could make him invisible. Marta stood with the tablet braced to her vest, stylus frozen midair. Lou remained by the doorway, close enough to hear, far enough to avoid being folded into operations command. The bay's sound floor pressed in around them. Pump grind, valve chatter from Bay 2, the high electric whine of a VFD under fluctuating load. None of it drowned out Kim's voice when she kept going. Mechanism is straightforward. Fouling reduces effective transfer area. DP rise confirms restriction. Cavitation reduces stable recirculation. Lower stable flow reduces heat rejection. Then feed raises generation rate. If generation exceeds rejection, bulk temperature accelerates, and kinetics steepen. At that point, the controller is chasing a moving target with less cooling than model assumptions. That is runaway onset. Darren finally turned toward her, expression tight with irritation rather than uncertainty. "You enjoy speeches," he said. "We need resin, not lectures." Kim pointed to the trend page without raising her hand above chest height, the gesture of someone presenting evidence in a room that pretended evidence was negotiable. "Then read your own data. Reactor bulk has climbed 1/2 degree in static hold. Static hold should flatten. It is climbing. That means we are accumulating heat without feed. Add initiator and monomer, and the slope does not stay linear." He gave a thin smile. "You always jump to worst case." "I jump to known case," Kim answered. "This exact pathway is in the incident database. Different plant, same sequence, deferred cleaning, override, manual feed, relief lift, fire." She keyed the radio again and kept her statement compact, factual, and externally audible. "Control to dispatch, Bay 3. Senior technician refusal remains active. Management directed manual override under unresolved high differential pressure and unstable recirculation." Dispatch answered after a breath. "Copy, Bay 3 update." Kim logged the response, then added, "Requesting process engineer review at panel." Darren snapped, "Denied. Engineering is in production meeting." Kim held his stare. "Then log that denial too." She typed while speaking each word, creating a spoken and written mirror that no later rewrite could soften. 7 o'clock. Request for engineering review denied by operations manager. By 7 o'clock, the fluorescent wash above reactor bay, 3 had turned flat and colorless against the stainless, and Kim could feel sweat under the collar of her coveralls despite the cool utility air. Stress did that in chemical units. Adrenaline ignored ambient temperature. She kept her breathing controlled and opened the interlock logic diagram, one of the few screens Darren rarely used because it displayed systems as dependencies instead of commands. "Look here," she said, angling the monitor toward Eli and Marta first. "Permissive chain includes HX204, DP high, recirc flow low, and reactor rate of rise guard. You can bypass one in manual. You cannot bypass chemistry. You can only delay the feedback long enough to lose your window." Eli swallowed. "What's the window?" Kim answered him immediately. "From first nonlinear slope to relief lift. Can be under a minute in this solvent mix if feed stays open. Faster if agitation load spikes and mixing goes uneven." Darren cut in. "We are not at nonlinear slope." Kim nodded once. "Not yet. That is why we still have a choice." She stepped to the side binder rack and pulled the startup packet from her own shift folder. The front page carried her signature block, today's date, and the unresolved checkbox at item 12. She set it on the console in front of Darren and tapped the unchecked field with one gloved finger. "I cannot sign transfer release under this condition. I will not backdate. I will not initial a bypass as temporary normalization. If you proceed, it goes under your authority code." His jaw flexed. "You think paperwork saves you?" "Paperwork records cause," she said. "Cause decides who pays later." Marta finally spoke, voice quiet but clear. "Kim, if he overrides and gives direct order, what do we do?" Kim answered without hesitation. "You follow emergency readiness, not blind feed. Face shields down, egress path open, fire watch channel active. Keep one hand free for cut command. Nobody stands in line with sight glass or relief piping." Darren threw both palms up in mock disbelief. "Listen to this. She's briefing for disaster while we're trying to run a batch." Kim did not flinch. "I'm briefing for reality while you're trying to skip maintenance." Lou shifted by the door and cleared his throat. "Darren, mechanical can isolate HX204 in 20 if you release us now." Darren rounded on him. 20 becomes 60, 60 becomes missed truck. We run." Kim faced Lou, then Darren, keeping the chain visible. "Maintenance offered corrective action. Management declined. Log that too." She wrote it, read it aloud, and saved. The red tile remained solid. DP ticked to 2.46. Jacket outlet touched 48.1. She pointed each number out as it moved. "Trend confirms deterioration during discussion." Darren leaned over the console and entered his credentials again, slower this time, deliberate enough to signal dominance to every person in the bay. Amber warning text filled the screen. Supervisor acknowledgement required. Potential thermal control degradation. Confirm manual control responsibility. He clicked accept. Kim's voice stayed steady, almost instructional. "State your order clearly." Darren glanced at her with open contempt. "You want a quote? Fine, run the batch now." Kim shook her head once. "Not my station under override." She turned to Eli. "You are hearing a direct order that conflicts with startup permissives. If you comply, do it with full PPE and readiness to terminate feed on my call. Do not chase his schedule. Watch the slope." Eli looked like he wanted a third option that did not exist. "I'm not signed off as lead." Darren answered for him. "You are now." Kim stepped back from the primary panel and removed her operator badge from the station clip, placing it in her chest pocket. The action was small, but everyone in the bay understood it. Formal refusal, transfer of command liability. She keyed radio one more time. Control to all Bay 3 personnel. Senior technician stepping off active command under management override. Unsafe condition declaration remains on record. Utilities acknowledged again. Dispatch repeated the time. 2 channels locked it in place. Darren pointed toward the blast door threshold. Then get off my floor. Kim held her position for 1 second longer and gave him the last professional warning she could ethically offer. If you insist on feed with fouled exchange, reduce initial rate to 20%, hold for thermal response, and keep manual cut hand at the lever. If bulk rate of rise exceeds 0.2 per 10 seconds, terminate immediately. If agitator load spikes, terminate immediately. If relief chirps, terminate immediately. Darren laughed under his breath. You are not giving commands anymore. I'm giving survival limits, she said. Then she walked to the blast door alcove, radio in hand, and stayed where she could see both the trend screen and the feed skid through laminated glass. She had refused the order. She had cited mechanism. She had documented every refusal and every denial. That should have ended the confrontation in any disciplined unit. It did not. It only changed its shape. Darren followed her to the alcove entrance, careful not to cross into the marked safe zone, as if paint lines carried legal force. His voice dropped into that controlled, punitive register supervisors used when they wanted fear to look administrative. You just killed your own position, he said. I can write this as insubordination, refusal of assigned duty, disruption of production. Kim met his eyes through the face shield. Write what you need. Include the DP value. Do not get clever with me. This isn't clever. It's traceable. He stepped closer, invading space without touching, finger stabbing the air toward the panel where Eli now stood rigid at half attention. That kid will do the work you refused, and when this batch ships, I'll make sure everyone knows who held us up for an hour. Kim's answer stayed flat. If this batch ships, QA will still see thermal history in viscosity and conversion spread. Darren blinked, annoyed she had shifted the argument from authority to downstream evidence. You don't know that. I do. Partially advanced polymer shows up in gel fraction and color drift. Customers reject that fast. He dismissed it with a hand wave. Quality can blend it. Not this grade, she said. Spec window is narrow and traceability follows lot code. The mention of lot code landed because it pointed beyond this room to contracts, claims, and emails nobody could shout down. Darren changed tactics. You're done in Bay 3 after today, he said. I'll bury you in utility rounds for the rest of the quarter. Kim shrugged once. Utility rounds beat burn ward rounds. For a moment his confidence cracked into anger, but he pulled it back into procedural threat. HR will hear you refused a direct order. HR will hear I refused an unsafe order under written procedure. You think they'll side with you? They'll side with records. He gave a cold smile. Records can be interpreted. Kim lifted the tablet where Marta had mirrored the log entries with witness initials. Not when there are 3 systems and 2 channels. Darren looked past her and snapped at Marta. Stop typing her narrative and assist operations. Marta hesitated, then spoke with visible effort. I'm completing required documentation. Darren swung toward Eli. You, at the skid. Open transfer on my mark. Eli's hands trembled once, then settled as he pulled his face shield down and checked his gloves. Kim watched him perform each step she had drilled in training. Verify lineups, confirm vent path, confirm cut position, confirm radio check. Fear did not make him careless. Pressure might. She keyed her radio to his private channel. Eli acknowledged comms. "I copy," he said, voice tight. "If I say cut, you cut. No debate." "Copy cut on your call." Darren heard and barked. "You take commands from me." Eli froze between two authorities, shoulders rigid. Kim intervened with language that left no room for interpretation. "Operational command is yours under override. Emergency cut call remains safety critical and valid from any qualified operator observing excursion. That is policy." Lou backed her from the door. "She's right on emergency authority." Darren shot him a glare and then checked his watch. "We are done arguing." At 7:03, with the override accepted and responsibility transferred by his own keystrokes, Darren opened the Shift roster app and made the threat formal in front of witnesses. Effective immediately, Kim Chambers is removed from lead on Bay 3 pending conduct review. He looked up as satisfied at the public sting. Ely Trent assumed station. The demotion landed like a steel door closing, but Kim felt a colder clarity settle in behind it. Titles changed in software. Thresholds did not. She spoke into the radio so dispatch captured every syllable. "Control to dispatch. Note roster change ordered by operations manager during active unsafe condition. Senior technician remains in observation position for emergency callouts." Dispatch replied, "Subdued now." "Copy Bay 3. Logged." Darren jabbed a finger toward the corridor. "Observation position? No. Leave the bay." Kim shook her head. "Negative. I stay at blast door per emergency readiness protocol once override operation begins under declared hazard." "That protocol applies if hazard is confirmed." "Hazard is confirmed by values on your own screen." He took one step toward her, then stopped at the yellow line, perhaps aware that cameras covered this angle. "You're testing me." "I'm testing your process against heat balance." The seconds stretched with no one speaking. Pump grind, fan hum, distant forklift beep. Then Darren turned away, perhaps deciding forced removal would create a cleaner legal problem for Kim than for him. "Fine," he said. "Stand there and watch someone competent work." Kim answered quietly enough that only the nearest mics and the people at the panel could hear. "Competence is not obedience. Competence is control." Darren raised his hand toward Eli at the skid, palm hovering for the signal that would start feed, and the power pressure phase was complete. Threat delivered, roll stripped, replacement installed, and liability now wearing a supervisor login with the red alarm still lit. Darren's raised hand dropped, and Eli pulled the feed lever through its first travel with the stiffness of someone opening a door he had already been told was on fire. The transfer pump answered with a low mechanical thud, then settled into a rising whine as monomer and initiator blend entered reactor 3 through the side injection manifold. Kim stayed behind the blast door threshold exactly where protocol put her, radio pressed to her chin, eyes locked on the trend screen through laminated glass. "Feed started, 7:03:12. Marta called, her voice clipped and tight as she typed with one hand and kept the other near the emergency cut station. Darren stood half a step behind Eli, not touching the controls, close enough to own the decision without taking the physical posture of the operator. Kim watched the first response line appear on the chart. Reactor bulk temperature. Previously drifting, now bending upward with a slope she recognized instantly. She keyed her radio to Bay Channel. All Bay 3, maintain egress clear, face shields down, no one crosses relief line of fire. Utilities acknowledged. Dispatch acknowledged. Darren said nothing into any channel. He spoke only to Eli, voice hard and transactional. Hold rate. Do not hunt it. The language sounded technical, but the command was schedule-driven. Keep feed moving. Don't lose throughput. Don't validate her refusal. 8 seconds later, bulk temperature crossed the high advisory threshold, and the tile changed from amber to pulsing red. Kim felt the change in her chest even before the horn cycle shifted. Not panic, not surprise, just the cold confirmation that the model in her head and the steel in front of her were now running the same script. Advisory crossed at +8, she said on radio, time stamping aloud. Recommend immediate feed termination and cool down. Eli's left hand twitched toward the cut lever. Darren's hand landed on his shoulder and held him in place. Keep it moving, Darren said. Advisory is not trip. Kim switched to Eli's direct channel, voice steady enough to cut through the horn pattern. Watch rate of rise, not label color. On screen, the derivative indicator climbed from 0.12 to 0.19 degrees per 10 seconds, then touched 0.22. She spoke again, each word separated and clear. Rate exceeds safe hold envelope. Terminate feed now. Darren leaned around Eli and barked toward the glass. He takes commands from operations. Kim answered over open channel, so the recorder caught both lines in sequence. Emergency cut authority remains active under excursion criteria. Excursion is active. The recirculation pump note roughened again. That same gravelly cavitation texture, but now layered under higher flow noise from feed, like marbles in a steel drum beneath a siren. By 7:04, the bay no longer sounded like a controlled startup. It sounded like two systems fighting for the same second. Agitator motor current climbed in quick stair steps as viscosity began to shift unevenly. The load trace jittered, then spiked, dipped, and spiked again. A signature that mixing quality was degrading as thermal pockets formed faster than circulation could flatten them. Kim saw Eli notice the same thing because his helmet turned from the lever to the agitator panel and back. Agitator at 91% load, Marta called. 94. Kim keyed radio immediately. That spike confirms accelerating reaction zones. Cut feed. Darren snapped. Stay at set point. He stabbed a finger at the production board magnets still clipped near the console, as if a green marker could anchor a red trend. Kim moved one step closer to the inner glass, not crossing the line, and pointed at the vent pressure trace now curling upward. You are burning response time, she said, not shouting. When vent hits threshold, you lose your quiet options. Eli swallowed audibly over channel. Darren, pressure's climbing fast. It always climbs on charge, Darren shot back. Ride it. Kim's jaw tightened behind the shield. Not like this. This slope is non-linear. 17 seconds after feed initiation, agitator load hit 98% and tripped momentarily to 101 before dropping to 97 as bubbles flashed through the mass. The brief overshoot made the mixer shaft groan through the floor grating, a felt vibration that climbed Kim's boots into her knees. At the same instant, reactor pressure reached relief threshold minus a fraction. Kim did not wait for the exact crossing. Terminate feed now, she transmitted louder this time. "Terminate feed now. We are at relief margin." Eli's right hand moved, stopped, then moved again, trapped between the memory of her training and the weight of Darren at his shoulder. Darren saw that hesitation and converted it into force. "Hold," he yelled directly into Eli's ear. 30 more seconds and we're stable." Kim's reply came flat, almost clinical, because emotion would only blur it. "There is no stabilization with fouled exchange and rising rate of rise. You are inside runaway onset." Marta turned from the keyboard, face pale under fluorescent light. "Vent at 96% of lift set." Kim kept her channel open. "All Bay 3, brace for relief event." The next 14 seconds stretched and then collapsed. Reactor bulk crossed 92 degrees, then 93, and with it the initiator decomposition rate steepened exactly where Kim had warned it would. Heat generation outran rejection by a widening margin. The controller opened cooling valve to max, but the fouled exchanger and oscillating recirculation flow had no reserve left to give. The command was there, the capacity was not. "Cooling valve full open, no response," Marta said, voice cracking on the last word. Kim answered immediately to keep her anchored to task. "Copy, full open, no response. Log it." Darren lunged for the panel and switched display pages as if a different screen could produce a different physics. Eli finally pulled his hand free and reached for cut, but Darren grabbed the lever guard to block him. "Not yet," he shouted. Kim hit the emergency call button on the wall panel behind the blast door alcove. A klaxon tone layered over existing alarms, and strobes began flashing at both bay exits. "Emergency condition declared. Bay 3 runaway indicators active," she transmitted to dispatch and fire team channel. The response came back already moving. "Copy, Bay 3 emergency. Brigade en route." 31 seconds after feed start, vent pressure hit relief set point and the relief valve lifted with a metallic scream that sliced through every other sound in the room. The noise was high, sharp, mechanical, and absolute. The kind that made everyone flinch, even with hearing protection. Superheated vapor blasted into the scrubber header at flow, well above design upset rate. The scrubber fans ramped to full, then choked against load. For one suspended heartbeat, a dense white plume punched from the stack line and rolled across the upper bay. Then it met an ignition source near Motor Control Center B, where a starter had been cycling under load all morning. The plume flashed orange in a violent sheet. Not a cinematic fireball, but a hard industrial flash front that lit steel, glass, and faces in one flat burst. The pressure wave hit a split second later, a blunt slap through the bay that rattled grating bolts, slammed cabinet doors open, and punched Kim backward against the blast door frame hard enough to knock the radio from her hand. Sight glass windows on the reactor side manifold shattered into bright fragments that sprayed across the deck and clattered like thrown gravel. A section of catwalk support, already weakened near an expansion joint, buckled under the shock load. Gravity took over. 2 operators on the far side, not in the direct flame path but inside the blast envelope, went down when the rail jerked and the decking dropped a short, violent distance. One struck hard on his shoulder and hip. The other hit knee first and rolled against the stanchion, both of them immediately shouting in the stunned, disbelieving way people do when pain and noise arrive together. Their coveralls showed patchy thermal scorching along one sleeve and thigh, where the flash had licked through before extinguishing. No one was trapped under steel, but both were injured and exposed in a hazard zone, now filled with hot vapor and alarm light. Kim pushed off the frame, grabbed her radio from the floor, and keyed emergency medical. 2 down on North Catwalk, conscious, mobility compromised. Probable fractures and thermal burns. Need med team at Bay 3 East access now. Dispatch came back fast, voice clipped. Med team inbound, 3 minutes. The bay had transformed from confrontation space into consequence space. Darren stumbled sideways into a panel cabinet, shirt cuff singed, hard hat knocked crooked, the certainty gone from his face in a single stroke. Eli had both hands on the cut lever now and yanked it fully closed. "Feed terminated," he yelled. Kim answered, "Confirm hard close and isolate upstream." Eli slammed the block valve wheel while Marta triggered remote isolation on the transfer pump. The pump note fell from whine to winding down growl, then silence except for a residual chatter in the line. Relief flow to near continued for several long seconds as vessel pressure bled down through the screaming valve. The orange at the MCC corner collapsed to intermittent licking flame around cable insulation. Then sprinkler deluge from overhead heads knocked it flat into steam and smoke. Kim switched channels again. "Fire team, ignition at MCCB knocked down by deluge. Verify de-energized before approach." Fire team acknowledged from the corridor. She moved her gaze back to the reactor indicators. Pressure descending through safer bands. Temperature still elevated but no longer climbing at runaway slope. Agitator load dropping in ragged steps as the mass settled. Darren tried to speak over the horn, words broken and defensive. It was stabilizing. It was almost... Kim cut him off without looking at him. "Save it for the recorder." She pointed to the north catwalk. "Help route medics and keep that lane clear." For once, he obeyed without argument, waving 2 uninjured techs to pull debris aside and mark a safe path with portable cones. Lou came in from the doorway with a fire blanket and first aid kit, face gray under grime. "I've got north side," he shouted. Kim nodded. "Do not move them unless secondary hazard develops. Talk to them. Keep them still." She stepped back to the panel and forced herself through the checklist she had recited in drills 100 times. Feed isolated. Energy source isolated. Relief status monitored. Ignition controlled. Head count initiated. Casualty count transmitted. External response acknowledged. Her hands shook once when she reached for the keyboard, then steadied as muscle memory took over. She entered 070403 relief lift, 070405 vapor ignition near MCCB, 070407 pressure wave, structural damage north catwalk, 2 personnel injuries, emergency shutdown in progress. Every timestamp was a nail in the chain of causality. Smoke drifted under the lights in a low gray band while strobes painted the steel columns red, white, red. Someone was crying near the utility station. Short, breathless sounds between coughs. Someone else kept repeating, "Cuts closed, cuts closed," as if saying it could rewind the minute. Kim stayed on the radio and on the data because leadership in the first 5 minutes after an industrial failure was mostly about narrowing chaos into tasks. "All units, this is Bay 3, she said. "Primary event contained, secondary fire knocked down, maintain exclusion until gas check clears." Gas detection techs answered. They were setting perimeter monitors. Fire brigade entered with thermal camera and confirmed no active spread beyond the MCC corner and superficial insulation burns near the vent line. Medics reached the catwalk casualties and began stabilization, voices calm and procedural under the alarm horns. One injured operator gripped the medic's sleeve and asked if the reactor was going to blow again. The medic answered, "You're safe right now. Stay with me." Kim heard it and let one controlled breath out through clenched teeth. At 7:11, 8 minutes after Darren gave the start signal, the immediate violence had stopped. But the aftermath machinery had only begun. Incident command activation, automatic corporate notifications, environmental sampling trigger, and the first legal preservation lock on control system logs. Kim removed her glove, pressed her thumb against the panel scanner, and initiated data archive hold so no one could purge trend history under routine rollover. The system pinged acceptance. That single beep was quiet compared to the horns, but in her mind it was as significant as any valve movement. Evidence secured, she looked through the smoky glass at the scarred bay, at Eli standing rigid beside the closed lever, at Darren speaking rapidly to a supervisor on phone with a face gone ashen, and at Marta still typing through trembling fingers because she understood that facts written now would outlive every excuse drafted later. The dread phase was over. Impact had happened. Physics had taken command back in less than a minute, exactly where Kim said it would. And everyone still standing now had to work inside the truth it had left behind. Kim kept her thumb on the archive terminal until she saw the second confirmation prompt, then selected Full Historian Mirror, C, CTV Retention, and Operator Audio Preservation, because incident memory decayed fast once legal language entered the room. At 7:12, the unit superintendent, Armand Velez, came through the east access with the fire lieutenant and the on-call process engineer, all three in emergency hoods, and Kim gave turnover in clipped sequence while strobes still pulsed over wet steel. Feed start 070312 under supervisor override, advisory at +8 seconds, agitator load excursion at +17, relief lift at +31, ignition near MCCB at +33, feed hard closed after flash, 2 injured on North Catwalk, conscious at handoff. Armin did not interrupt. He only asked, "Records locked?" Kim pointed to the panel. "Historian, radio cameras, and logbook all preserved." The fire lieutenant added, "Any hidden fire load?" She answered, "Thermal camera showed only residual heat at cable tray and vent insulation. Deluge knocked active flame." Then she looked at Armand directly. The trigger chain started with HX204 high differential pressure and override of startup permissive. By 7:14, the medics had both injured operators on backboards at the east corridor threshold. One kept asking for his headset bag, as if losing equipment would be the real penalty. The other clenched his jaw and focused on the medic's count while they stabilized his leg. Kim stepped to the side as they passed and heard the medic transmit, "2 adults, inhalation irritation, thermal burns, probable fracture and shoulder trauma, both hemodynamically stable for transport." Stable did not mean minor. It meant alive enough to fight through treatment. Darren stood 5 feet away, with a borrowed blanket around his shoulders, face pale under soot streaks, trying to call corporate operations from a phone with wet gloves. No one took the phone from him, but no one looked to him for instructions either. The command structure had already shifted to the people who still described mechanisms instead of excuses. At 7:18, Armand assigned zones. Fire Brigade kept hot zone control around Bay 3. Mechanical isolated HX204 and tagged every valve in the loop. Electrical locked out MCCB and posted a no energize board. Kim was ordered to remain at the panel as technical witness and timeline custodian. She accepted without comment and started the first formal event log outside the operations diary, reading each entry aloud to Marta before saving. 7:19, evidence chain initiated. Physical item 1, supervisor override terminal screenshot, captured and hash stamped. Item 2, handwritten startup card with unchecked permissive field, bagged by safety officer. Item 3, portable ultrasonic meter readings exported to server and signed by maintenance witness Lou Denning. Item 4, lockout key custody transferred from Darren Pike to incident command. Marta's hands still trembled, but her typing stayed accurate. That mattered more than steady hands. 3 days earlier, the bay had felt like routine pressure. At 7:26, it felt like a courthouse with pumps. Armand opened a conference call on speaker with corporate, EHS, legal, risk, and insurance intake, and he asked Kim to state the initiating deviation in one sentence. She did not soften it. Startup feed proceeded after explicit refusal and after supervisor override, bypassed high DP permissive on HX2 OR with verified fouling and unstable recirculation. The insurance intake officer asked, "Was the bypass documented as temporary control with engineering sign-off?" Kim replied, "No engineering sign-off. Request for engineer review was denied at 7 o'clock and logged." Legal asked, "Were warnings verbal only?" She answered, "Verbal on recorded channels, written in DCS log, mirrored by witness tablet, confirmed by dispatch acknowledgments." Risk management went quiet for 2 seconds, then said, "Preserve all command audio and access logs for user credentials." Armand looked at Kim and nodded once. She had already done it. By 7:40, the first rough damage walk-down started under gas clear permit. Kim went with Lou and the process engineer, Elena Shore, because she knew exactly which components had seen the worst thermal and pressure stress. Reactor 3's outer shell showed a heat-tinted scar around the upper nozzle cluster, and one section near the instrument pad had warped enough to fail dimensional tolerance. Sight glass assemblies were gone, frames twisted and empty. Vent line insulation had charred in a 6-meter stretch toward the scrubber branch. At MCCB, 2 starter buckets were blackened, and 1 cable run had lost jacket integrity over a short segment. Elena dictated numbers into her recorder as they moved. Preliminary. Reactor vessel likely non-returnable pending metallurgical thickness scan. Relief valve requires replacement and bench certification. Scrubber inlet duct inspection mandatory. Electrical rebuild localized, but critical path. Lou added the line everyone in operations understood. This bay does not restart next week. At 8:05, while decon crews washed residue into contained drains, QA called from finished goods hold and asked for immediate lot quarantine. Kim took the call on speaker with Armand present. "We pulled retention samples from the first totes loaded before incident declaration," QA lead Noreen said. "Viscosity drift is outside customer window and color index is trending high. We're placing all morning lots on hold." Armand asked, "How many shipments touched?" Noreen answered, 2 outbound trucks left gate before stop order. We are issuing customer hold notices now." That was the delayed consequence crossing from theory into paperwork. Even before full fire reports were written, product integrity was already compromised. Kim logged the call as external contact outcome and noted lot codes, truck numbers, and notification times. Noreen's final line was blunt. If those lots had fully reached blending, we'd be facing returns across 3 contracts. At 8:32, county regulators were notified under mandatory release reporting, and at 8:47 the federal workplace safety call was completed from the incident office, with Kim, Armand, and legal listening on mute. The compliance officer on the line asked the same 2 questions every veteran feared because they cut through narrative fog. Was there an injury requiring inpatient treatment? Yes, 2. Was a safety interlock bypassed prior to event? Yes. Supervisor override on active high DP permissive. The officer gave a case number and said an investigator would be on site that day. No drama, no raised voice, just administrative certainty. Kim wrote the case number beside her 7 o'clock engineer denial entry and drew a box around both. Causality had moved from Bay language to statutory language. By 9:10, the financial controller joined Incident Command with a whiteboard and started the first loss stack, while steam still drifted from the deck grates. Direct equipment and infrastructure damage, preliminary, $18.6 million. Business interruption model at current production backlog, $31.4 million if outage exceeded 6 weeks. Environmental cleanup and waste handling reserve, initial $4.2 million. Kim listened as he built the numbers in layers, replacement lead times, contractor premiums, rental utilities, expedited freight, customer penalty clauses, and she heard the same moral equation she had been trying to prevent all morning. Deferred cleaning labor that would have cost a fraction of 1 shift had converted into a multi-category loss event before lunch. The controller did not editorialize. He wrote 1 sentence at the board's bottom in block letters. Assumes no further vessel crack propagation. At 9:36, Elena returned from metallurgy with a first pass that tightened the shutdown forecast. Thermal distortion exceeds repair tolerance near upper seam. We need full vessel replacement or certified sleeve solution. Earliest safe return with parallel work is 47 days. Armand repeated it back to confirm. 47, not 14. Elena nodded. 47 if procurement cooperates, and no hidden damage appears in scrubber internals. Kim added the timeline to the official chronology and included the source name and discipline. Across the room, Darren sat at a folding table with an ice pack on his wrist, giving a statement to HR and legal. He had stopped making calls. He had also stopped saying stabilizing. Words lost force once the curve data, access logs, and override timestamps sat in one folder. Shortly after 10 o'clock, insurance sent a field adjuster by video, and the key question arrived in language everyone understood. Did management knowingly operate outside documented permissive limits? Armand passed the question to Kim as technical witness. She answered, yes. Limits were visible, acknowledged, and bypassed. Refusal and hazard mechanism were stated before feed. The adjuster asked for proof of acknowledgement. Kim pointed to synchronized records. Darren's console login acceptance, dispatch audio copybacks, and witness-initialed tablet entries. The adjuster did not argue. He said, understood, coverage position will likely include partial denial tied to willful deviation, formal determination pending full report. Legal muted the line and looked at Armand with a flat expression that needed no translation. Partial denial meant the company would absorb a large share of losses that insurance normally carried. The cost of ego had just found its accounting code. At 10:24, the injured operator's status update came from the hospital transfer desk. Both had been admitted to the burn unit for monitored treatment and orthopedic evaluation. Neither was in critical decline. Kim closed her eyes for a single breath when she heard stable admissions, then opened them and kept typing. She logged names, receiving physician, and restrictions on internal communication. No rumors, no casual updates on group chat, no speculation. Armin thanked the nurse, ended the call, and instructed HR to activate family support and wage continuation protocol. That decision landed in the room with quiet weight. Rational reckoning was not only lawsuits and invoices. It was also whether injured people had to worry about rent while skin graft consults were being scheduled. By 11:05, after 4 hours of statements, scans, and containment checks, the unit's consequence map was clear enough to publish internally. Kim read the draft incident bulletin before release and corrected one sentence that said, "Unexpected process upset." She changed it to "preventable runaway initiated during documented safeguard bypass under fouled heat exchanger condition." Armand approved the edit. The bulletin went out plant-wide with immediate actions. All exothermic startups suspended pending hazard review, mandatory supervisor override audit, an emergency refresher on permissive logic and refusal rights. Training department scheduled 3 sessions before end of week. Kim noted another delayed impact already forming: reputation outside the fence. Procurement had forwarded 2 customer emails asking whether supply continuity claims were still reliable. Sales wanted language. Legal wanted restraint. Physics had already written the clearest language available. At 11:22, Incident Command closed the emergency phase and opened formal investigation phase. Kim finally stepped away from the panel and looked through the glass at what Bay 3 had become: soaked grating, bagged debris, tagged valves, and green production magnets knocked off Darren's board and stuck in a puddle under warning tape. The irony was harsh and clean. He had fought for schedule optics and lost schedule reality. She removed her face shield, wiped residue from the rim, and signed the chain of custody packet for her logs, radio transcripts, and the startup card she had refused to falsify. Armin took the packet and said, "These records are the spine of this case." Kim answered in the same tone she had carried all shift. "They're the spine because the mechanism was simple. Fouled exchanger cut heat rejection, override removed pause, feed accelerated generation, runaway followed." Then she picked up her hard hat, walked toward the debrief room, and prepared to repeat the same facts to every investigator, insurer, and attorney who would ask. Because in industrial failures, the truth only protected people if someone kept stating it precisely. Then she pushed through the debrief room door and found Incident Command already converted into Investigation Command. The folding tables were now arranged in a hard rectangle, each seat tagged by function instead of name: operations, maintenance, safety, legal, witness. The smell had changed from hot solvent to damp paper, coffee, and smoke that had followed people in on their sleeves. Armin stood at the head with Elena Shore and a safety officer from corporate, and when Kim entered, he pointed to the evidence cart parked beside the whiteboard. "We're doing chain closure live," he said. "You verify each item against your log." Kim set her hard hat down, opened her notebook, and read the first line while the safety officer lifted a sealed bag. "Item 1, Supervisor Override Terminal Screenshot, hash stamped at 7:19. The officer turned the bag so everyone could see the barcode and checksum printout. Legal counsel Priya Nassar read the validation from her laptop. Hash matches server mirror. Submitted to regulator portal at 11:31. Item cleared. The second bag came up. The laminated startup card with the unchecked permissive box and Kim's refusal initials. Priya said, "Scanned. Witness signed by Marta Ruiz and Lou Denning. Original sealed for hearing. Verified and logged." Third was the ultrasonic meter export, with Lou's signature and raw waveform attached. Elena nodded as she reviewed it. Oscillation confirms unstable recirculation during pre-feed hold. Added to technical appendix. Accepted into record. Last was the lockout key custody envelope. Armand held it up himself. Recovered from Darren Pike, transferred to Incident Command, now transferred to Security Evidence Locker C, receipt number 7743. Kim checked the number against her line and marked the final box. Every physical thread she had opened now had a destination. At 11:38, dispatch patched through the first callback from the county investigator, already at the gate. Speakerphone clicked, then a measured voice. "This is Investigator Hall. We have your report ID and request immediate access to control logs, radio, audio, and witness statements." Priya answered, "Access granted under preservation protocol. We are ready for walkthrough at noon." Kim added, "Please include the 7 o'clock engineer review denial and 7:03 override acceptance in your sequence." Hall replied, "Noted." A second call came 2 minutes later from QA. Noreen sounded exhausted but controlled. "Update on those 2 outbound trucks. First truck was stopped before unload and is returning sealed. Second had 1 tote offloaded. Customer quarantined it and accepted hold instructions. No field use." Armand asked, "Any spread to blend lines?" "None," Noreen said. "Containment worked because we called fast." Kim logged outcome beside the lot codes. External contact closed with result, not rumor. At 12:06, Hall walked Bay 3 in a respirator and face shield, then sat across from Kim with a legal pad already half filled. "State your refusal language exactly as you recall." She repeated it word for word. The fouled exchanger, reduced heat removal, initiator acceleration above 92, and runaway risk if feed was forced. Hall asked, "Did anyone contradict the mechanism with alternate engineering data?" "No," Kim said. "Only schedule pressure." He asked when Darren physically blocked Eli's hand. Kim gave the second mark. Roughly plus 28 to plus 30 seconds from feed start. Audio should capture me issuing cut command and him shouting hold. Hall underlined that line twice. Eli was interviewed next. He entered pale, still smelling faintly of extinguisher powder, and sat with both hands clasped so tight his knuckles blanched. Hall asked, "Why did you hesitate on cut?" Eli looked at Kim once, then back at Hall. "Because he had authority and his hand was on my shoulder." Then because he grabbed the guard. He swallowed. "Kim trained us to cut on slope, not color. She was right. I should have cut at her first call." That loaded silence from the bay, the one that had sat on him like a weight, was finally spoken into record. By 13:20, HR began the conduct hearing in conference room C. Darren arrived with a fresh shirt, borrowed from stores, but the cuff of his jacket still carried a brown scorch line no detergent would erase. He opened with control language. "I made a discretionary call under throughput pressure with available safeguards." Priya slid the printed timeline toward him. "You bypassed a safeguard. That is not with safeguards." Darren tried again. The advisory alarm does not mandate shutdown, Elena answered, precise and cold. Correct in isolation, not correct with verified fouling, unstable recirculation, and rising rate of rise. Priya played the audio clip from 7:04. Kim's voice. Terminate feed now. Darren's voice over it. Hold. Then the relief scream cut through the speaker so sharply that everyone at the table went still for 1 full second. Priya paused playback and asked, "Is that your command?" Darren stared at the table. "Yes." Armin spoke next, no anger in it, only finality. "Effective now. You are removed from duty pending termination for willful override of process safety controls and reckless direction during active excursion." Security waited outside the door when the sentence ended. Darren looked at Kim as he stood, searching for an argument that would reopen physics. He found none. 3 days later at 9 a.m., Thursday, the federal investigator held a formal readout in the training auditorium. Rows of operators, supervisors, mechanics, and contractors sat in silence while Hall projected the causal chain as a single line of boxes. Deferred HX cleaning. High differential pressure active. Authorization refusal documented. Supervisor override accepted. Feed continued against cut commands. Relief event. Ignition. Injuries. Hall tapped each box with a pen. This is not a mystery event. This is a preventable event. He announced willful citations against the company and named Darren Pike in the referral packet for criminal negligence review. Then he turned toward Kim. Your time-stamped refusals and redundant reporting channels prevented this from becoming a contested narrative. Around the room, heads nodded from people who had watched her be called obsolete. No one used that word now. At 10:17, the insurance adjuster returned by video with formal determination. Coverage accepted for accidental damage components, he said. Coverage denied in part for losses tied to documented willful safeguard bypass by supervisory personnel. The controller asked for percentage. The adjuster gave it. The number landed like dropped steel. No argument followed because the clip of Darren's hold command had already erased ambiguity. 30 minutes later, sales joined with legal for the customer call everyone had feared. 2 major buyers terminated multi-year agreements, citing continuity risk and quality assurance confidence failure. Kim listened from the side wall while sales read the notices aloud. This was the delayed consequence completing its arc. No explosion in that room, only signatures leaving. That afternoon, Marta asked Kim for 5 minutes in the empty simulator bay. She held a printed copy of her mirrored notes, corners worn from handling. I kept thinking I should have said more in the moment, she said. Kim answered, You did the critical thing. You wrote exactly what happened while it was happening. Marta exhaled and nodded. When Darren looked at me after the override, I thought if I stopped typing, this could become a misunderstanding later. She gave a short, shaky laugh. Turns out typing was louder than arguing. Kim took the pages, signed the witness confirmation line, and handed them back for archive. Another thread closed. On day 47 at 6:30, Bay 3 restarted under a different soundscape. HX204 had been chemically cleaned, hydro-tested, and baseline profiled. The recirculation pump note was smooth again. No gravel in it, just steady hydraulic hiss. The permissive screen sat green and honest. Armin stood at the back rail with Elena, Lou, Marta, and Eli in full PPE. And Kim held lead station again by written assignment. She spoke the startup checks aloud and waited for each response. HX204 differential pressure? Eli answered, 1.12 bar, stable. Jacket outlet trend? Marta, flatten, no drift. Emergency cut authority? Lou, confirmed and understood by all. Kim looked at the curve, then at the crew, and gave the command only when data and procedure aligned. Begin feed at 20%. Hold for response. 8 seconds passed. Trend rose slightly, then settled. 17 seconds passed. Agitator load held steady. 31 seconds passed. No relief chatter, no horn escalation, only controlled process sound. Elena said quietly, "That is what normal looks like." Kim nodded once. Normal is earned. At 8:02, a courier delivered the final HR notice to Incident Command. Armand read it, then handed it to Kim for witness acknowledgement. Termination for Darren Pike. Upheld after review. Ineligible for supervisory role at any affiliated site. Referral package transmitted to authorities and civil counsel. Kim signed receipt and placed the notice in the case binder behind the evidence index. The binder now held every item that had begun as a shouted argument in a hot bay and ended as verified fact. Logs, audio, photos, custody receipts, regulator numbers, hospital status updates, customer notices, and corrected startup procedures with mandatory dual sign-off on any permissive challenge. No loose ends remained, only consequences mapped to actions. At shift end, Kim stood at the panel while cleanup crews removed the last section of warning tape from the north catwalk. Fresh grating had replaced the buckled span. New sight glasses were installed with steel guards. The green production magnets were back on the board, but now a red card sat above them in plain block letters. No override without engineering and safety present. Eli stopped beside her, helmet under one arm. "You were right that morning," he said. Kim kept her eyes on the stable trend and answered with the principle that had carried every scene since dawn. It was never about being right. It was about heat balance and people going home. The pump kept its smooth note, the alarms stayed quiet, and Bay 3 finally answered to procedure again.